Emily Hart had always loved the quiet, but lately, the silence in her home had grown too heavy. Her husband, Daniel, worked long hours at his accounting firm, and even when he was home, his attention was buried in spreadsheets and late-night phone calls. They barely spoke anymore, except about bills or grocery lists. The warmth they once shared had faded into polite distance. After one particularly cold dinner, Emily decided she needed to get away just for a while. She found an ad for a cabin in northern Vermont, isolated, surrounded by forest and perfect for a weekend of solitude. It was meant to be a break, a way to clear her thoughts. Daniel didn't argue. He simply nodded and said, "You probably need it." His detached tone made her heart ache, but she didn't show it. The next morning, she packed her bag, left a note on the counter, and drove north. The drive was long and winding. The trees grew taller the deeper she went into the woods, their branches creating shadows that danced across the road. When she finally reached the cabin, the sun was setting, painting the sky orange and pink. The cabin stood small but sturdy, its wooden frame aged and moss-covered, with smoke marks around the chimney from old fires. Emily stepped out of her car and took a deep breath. The air was cold, crisp, and clean. For the first time in months, she felt like she could breathe again, inside. The cabin was simple, one main room with a stone fireplace, a small kitchen, and a single bed tucked near a window. There was no TV, no Wi-Fi, just silence. She lit the fireplace, made a cup of tea, and sat down on the couch, feeling the warmth spread across her face. She looked around, noticing how the shadows shifted with the firelight, and felt a strange mixture of peace and unease as night fell. She unpacked and tried to read a book, but her thoughts kept drifting. She missed Daniel even though he'd made her feel invisible for months. She wondered if he missed her too, or if he was buried in work. Not even noticing the empty bed beside him, a sudden sound pulled her from her thoughts, a soft knock at the door. Emily froze. It was almost 9 p.m., and she hadn't seen another soul since she arrived. She hesitated before walking to the door, her hand trembling slightly as she unlocked it. A man stood outside, tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a dark jacket and a beanie. His face was rugged, with kind eyes that seemed to study her carefully. "Sorry to bother you," he said quickly, raising his hands as if to show he meant no harm. "I'm Jack. I live in the next cabin down the trail. Just wanted to make sure you got here all right. We don't get many visitors up here." Emily let out a small breath. "Oh, thank you. Yes, I'm fine. Just settling in." Jack smiled, his eyes warm but curious. "Good. These woods can be strange at night. If you need anything, help with firewood, directions, I'm around." She thanked him politely, and he nodded before disappearing into the dark. She locked the door behind him, but found herself glancing out the window once more. His cabin light flickered faintly through the trees, a reminder that she wasn't completely alone. Later, when she finally went to bed, the silence of the forest pressed in. The branches outside scraped against the glass, and the fire crackled softly. She drifted in and out of sleep until a sound woke her taut footsteps. They were faint, crunching through the snow outside. She held her breath, listening. They stopped near the window. Slowly she turned her head, her eyes landing on the thin curtain that swayed slightly, as though touched by the wind or someone's hand. Her heart thumped. She wanted to look, but fear pinned her to the bed. After a few moments, the sound faded. She stayed still until the early morning light filtered through the window. When she stepped outside at dawn, she saw them footprints in the snow. Big, heavy ones, circling near her window before disappearing into the trees. Her first thought was Jack. Maybe he came to check on her. But why wouldn't he knock? She tried to brush it off, convincing herself it must have been an animal. Still, something inside her felt unsettled. Later that day, while gathering wood behind the cabin, she heard a voice. "You shouldn't be doing that alone." She turned sharply. It was Jack again, smiling, an axe resting on his shoulder. He offered to help, and though she hesitated, she agreed. They talked while he chopped wood, simple things at first. He told her about living alone in the woods after his divorce, How he'd once been an architect in the city but left everything behind to find peace. His voice was calm, his laugh easy. There was something grounded about him, a quiet sadness that made him seem familiar. As the sky turned golden, they stood by the pile of logs, their breath visible in the cool air. "You seem like someone who came here to escape something," Jack said, his tone soft but certain. Emily hesitated, then smiled faintly. "Maybe, or someone who came here to remember who she used to be?" He nodded knowingly. Sometimes running away is the only way to hear yourself again. That night, Emily couldn't stop thinking about him. His words replayed in her head, his voice calm and patient. Felt like an echo of something she'd been missing for a long time. Around midnight, she sat by the fire, trying to read again. When she heard it, that same faint sound outside. Footsteps, her pulse quickened. Slowly, she turned her head toward the window. The curtains fluttered. And for a split second, she saw movement, a shadow, tall and unmistakably human. She stood up, her heart racing, and grabbed the flashlight from the table. When she shined it toward the window, nothing was there. She tried to convince herself it was just her imagination again, but the uneasy feeling clung to her. She checked the door, locked it, sat on the couch until exhaustion pulled her into sleep. In the morning when she stepped outside, the air felt colder. The footprints were back, this time leading from the trees directly to her front steps. She swallowed hard and looked toward the woods. Jack appeared again, walking toward her from the trail, holding a cup of coffee. "Morning," he said cheerfully. "Rough night." She studied him, wondering if he knew something. "Did you come by last night?" she asked cautiously. He paused, then smiled slightly. "No. Why?" "Nothing," she said quickly. "Just strange noises." He nodded, sipping his coffee. "This place can play tricks on you. The quiet does that." Then before leaving, he added, "Make sure to lock your doors. Some things in the woods like to wander close." His words lingered all day. That evening, as the light faded and the forest grew darker, she couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. She lit the fire again, sat by the window, and tried to distract herself. But as she grew sleepy, she heard something, a whisper. It was faint but clear, like a breath against her ear. "You're not alone." She froze. The fire crackled. Her heart pounded. Slowly she turned, scanning the room. Empty. The whisper came again, almost softer this time. "Emily." Her breath caught. She stood, trembling, her eyes darting to the shadows in the corners. "Who's there?" She whispered back, but there was no answer. The room seemed to grow colder. She felt it, that heavy, invisible presence pressing around her. And though she couldn't see anyone, she could feel eyes on her, steady and near. Emily ran to the window and looked out. The forest was dark, except for one faint glow, a lantern flickering near the trees. And in that dim light, field, she saw him, Jack, standing still, watching her cabin. He didn't move. He didn't wave. He just stood there, as if guarding something unseen. Then, before she could call out, the lantern light went out. The woods went black. Emily stepped back from the window, her pulse hammering. She whispered to herself, trying to calm down. "You're just tired. Just tired." But as she turned toward her bed, she could still feel it, that haunting certainty that she wasn't alone in the cabin. And when she finally lay down, her eyes open in the dark, a voice deep and low seemed to echo from somewhere close. "You're not alone, Emily, not anymore." And she knew then someone or something was watching her. The morning after the whisper, Emily tried to convince herself it had all been a dream. She told herself it was the stress, the loneliness, maybe even the sound of the wind through the cracks in the walls. But deep down she knew it hadn't been just her imagination. The voice that said her name still echoed in her ears, calm, close, and unmistakably human. She decided to leave that day, to drive back to town and spend the rest of her weekend somewhere less isolated. But when she went outside, her car keys were missing. She searched her bag, her coat, even the snow by the steps, but they were gone. Panic started to rise in her chest. She tried calling Daniel, but there was no service. The woods surrounded her, quiet and still, like they were holding their breath. Then, through the trees, she saw movement. Jack carrying a pile of chopped wood toward her cabin. Relief washed over her. She waved and called out, "Jack, wait." He stopped and smiled as she approached. "Morning. You look like you've seen a ghost." She hesitated before saying, "My keys are gone. I can't find them anywhere." "I was thinking of leaving early," but he frowned, setting down the wood. "That's strange. Maybe you dropped them near the trail yesterday. I can help you look." They spent an hour searching, but the keys never turned up. Jack offered to drive her into town after lunch to get a spare made. She reluctantly agreed. Inside the cabin, he helped her light the fire again. And they talked while the snow started falling outside. It felt strangely comforting having someone there. His voice was warm, calm, and steady. She found herself relaxing, laughing even, which surprised her at one point. She said softly, "You make this place feel less lonely." Jack looked at her for a long moment before replying, "Maybe you needed someone to remind you that you're still worth being around." The words caught her off guard. She turned away, hiding a small smile. It had been a long time since anyone said something kind like that to her. After lunch, they set out for his truck, parked a short walk away through the trees. The snow had thickened into a steady fall, muffling every sound. As they walked, Emily noticed something odd. A second cabin, half hidden by branches. Its windows were dark, the roof sagging slightly. "Who lives there?" she asked. Jack's expression changed. "No one," he said quickly. "It's been empty for years." But as they passed, Emily felt eyes on her again, the same heavy awareness she'd felt the night before. She turned her head, and for a brief second, she saw a shadow move behind the cracked window. Jack caught her staring and said firmly, "Don't go near that place. It's not safe." They reached the truck, but when he turned the key, the engine sputtered and died. He cursed under his breath, trying again and again, but it wouldn't start. "Battery's dead," he said. "Looks like we're stuck here until tomorrow." Emily's heart sank. The snow was falling harder now, and daylight was fading fast. "So, what do we do?" "I'll stay nearby tonight," Jack said, "just to make sure you're safe. This storm can get bad." Something in his tone was protective, almost tender. Despite the fear that still lingered, she nodded. "All right, thank you." That night, the wind howled outside, shaking the windows. The power flickered but stayed on. Emily sat near the fireplace, wrapped in a blanket, while Jack sat across from her, quietly carving a piece of wood with a small knife. The rhythm of his movements was calming. "You really live out here all alone?" she asked. He nodded. "After my divorce, I couldn't stand the city. Too much noise, too many people pretending they're happy." Emily smiled faintly. "That sounds familiar." He looked up. "Your husband." She hesitated, then sighed. "We don't fight. We just stopped caring, I guess. It's like living beside a stranger." Jack's gaze softened. "You deserve more than that. Everyone does." For a long time, neither of them spoke. The fire crackled and the snow kept falling. Emily found herself studying his face, the lines around his eyes, the quiet sadness in them. He looked like someone who had loved deeply and lost even deeper. Eventually, she grew tired and said she was going to sleep. Jack offered to stay on the couch, and she thanked him. She went into the small bedroom, closed the door halfway, and lay down. But sleep didn't come easily. The whisper from the night before haunted her. She turned over again and again until finally, exhaustion pulled her under. She didn't know how long she'd been asleep when she woke suddenly. The firelight from the main room glowed faintly through the half-open door. She heard movement, slow, careful footsteps. Her body tensed. The floor creaked just outside the bedroom. She turned her head and froze. Someone was standing in the doorway. For a moment, she thought it was Jack. But something about the silhouette was wrong. Taller, heavier. She opened her mouth to speak. But the figure moved away before she could say a word. Heart pounding, she got out of bed, grabbed the flashlight, and walked into the main room. Jack was asleep on the couch, his hand still resting on the carved piece of wood. The front door was locked. Everything seemed untouched. She stood there, trembling, staring at him. If Jack was there, then who had been at her door? The next morning, she told him what she saw. His reaction was strange calm to calm to calm. "You've been through a lot. Your mind might be playing tricks," he said. "This cabin can do that to people." She wanted to believe him, but doubt crept in. Later, while he went outside to check the truck again, she walked around the cabin searching for any sign of what she'd seen. And that's when she found it, a footprint larger than Jack's. Pressed deep in the snow right outside her window, her pulse raced. Someone had been there when Jack came back. She showed him the footprint. His face darkened, and for the first time, she saw fear in his eyes. "We should go to my place," he said quickly. "You'll be safer there." They packed what little she had and started toward his cabin. The wind was sharp, biting at their faces, and the snow made it hard to see. When they finally reached his home, Emily was surprised. It was warm, clean, and surprisingly organized, like someone had built it to last forever. As she looked around, she noticed something that made her pause. On the wall above the fireplace hung a photo Jack with a woman who looked eerily like her. Same hair color, same smile. She stepped closer. "Who is she?" she asked. Jack hesitated. "My wife," he said softly. "She's gone now." There was something in his voice, regret, pain, and something else she couldn't name. Emily didn't ask more, but the resemblance stayed in her mind like a shadow. That night, she lay on the couch, staring at the ceiling. The storm outside had turned violent, shaking the cabin. Jack was in the next room, but she couldn't sleep. Around midnight, she heard a sound faint, like whispering. At first, she thought it was the wind. But then she realized it was coming from outside. She got up and looked through the window. The storm had slowed, and through the snow, she saw something moving near the tree line, a flicker of light, a lantern swaying back and forth. She turned toward Jack's room. "Jack," she called softly. No answer. The whisper grew louder. She pressed her hand against the cold glass. Then she saw him, a man standing in the snow, holding the lantern, looking directly at her. Her blood ran cold. It wasn't Jack. She blinked, and the light vanished. Emily stumbled back, her heart pounding. She ran to Jack's door and knocked. "Jack, there's someone outside." He opened it almost instantly, already dressed, as if he'd been awake. His face was pale. "Stay here," he said firmly, grabbing his coat. "No, don't go out there." She protested, but he was already outside, disappearing into the storm. Minutes passed. Then 10, then 20. No sign of him. The cabin creaked in the wind. Emily stood by the fire, every muscle tense, waiting for the door to open. Finally, it did, and Jack stepped inside, covered in snow, his face unreadable. "Did you find anyone?" she asked. He paused, looking straight at her. "No," he said quietly. "No one's out there," but something in his eyes said otherwise. He was hiding something. She didn't press him. But as she turned to go back to bed, she noticed something strange on his sleeve. Smeared faintly against the snow was a dark red stain. And before she could say a word, Jack said softly, "You should get some rest. Emily, tomorrow everything will make sense." But deep down, she knew nothing about this place made sense anymore. And as she lay awake that night, she realized the one person she trusted might not be who she thought he was. Emily barely slept that night. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw that red stain on Jack's sleeve. The storm outside had eased, but the silence that followed felt heavier than the wind ever had. Morning light crept through the frosted window, dim and cold. Jack was already up, sitting by the fire, staring into the flames like he was lost somewhere far away. "Did you sleep?" he asked without turning. "Not really," she admitted. Her voice was shaky. "Are you sure no one was out there last night?" Jack hesitated. "I didn't find anyone," he said finally. "But you're safe here, Emily. That's all that matters." His calmness should have reassured her, but it didn't. There was something guarded about the way he spoke now. something hidden. She couldn't forget the photo of his wife, the one who looked so much like her, or the way his eyes seemed haunted when she asked about her. After breakfast, Emily decided she needed to find her car keys. She couldn't stay here any longer. When Jack stepped out to fetch more wood, she quietly searched his cabin. She checked drawers, shelves, even under furniture. Nothing. Then, behind the books on a low shelf, she found a small wooden box. Inside were a few old photos, yellowed with age. One was of Jack and his wife standing right outside this same cabin, smiling. But another photo made her blood run cold. It was of her standing by her own car, taken from a distance. She recognized her coat the day she'd arrived. Her hands shook as she heard footsteps returning. She quickly put the box back and stepped away. Jack entered, brushing snow from his jacket, and smiled faintly. "Everything okay?" She nodded too quickly. "Just tired." He studied her for a moment, like he could sense something was off. Then he said gently, "You don't have to be afraid of me, Emily." Not. She lied, but she was. Later that afternoon, while he went out to check on the generator, she took the chance to slip out. The snow had melted enough to make the road visible again. She followed it, hoping to reach the main road before dark. Her heart pounded with every step. The forest was eerily quiet. No birds, no wind. Only the sound of her boots crunching against the icy ground. After nearly an hour, she stopped to rest near a fallen tree. That's when she heard footsteps behind her, slow, measured. She turned around and her breath caught. Jack was standing a few yards away, his expression unreadable. "You shouldn't wander off like that," he said calmly. "These woods can be dangerous." "I just needed some air." She stammered. He took a step closer. "You were trying to leave." There was no anger in his voice, only disappointment, which somehow felt worse. Emily's throat tightened. "I thought you wanted me to be safe." "I do," he said softly. "But out there, you're not safe. You don't understand what's happening." Her heart raced. "Then tell me, what is happening?" Jack looked around as if the trees themselves were listening. Then he said quietly, "You remember the voice you heard your first night here? The one that said your name?" She nodded, barely breathing. "It wasn't your imagination," he continued. "And it wasn't me." Emily froze. "Then who was it?" Jack's jaw tightened. "My wife died in this forest 3 years ago. But sometimes I think she never really left." The world seemed to tilt beneath her feet. "Jack, that doesn't make sense." "I didn't believe it at first either," he said. "But I've seen her. I've heard her. She doesn't want anyone else here. She thinks they're replacing her." Emily stepped back. "Jack, stop. You're scaring me." He raised his hands gently. "I'm trying to protect you. You look so much like her when you showed up. I thought maybe it was a sign. Maybe I could make things right this time." Emily shook her head. "I have to go." Before he could respond, she turned and ran. Branches whipped at her arms, snow crunched beneath her boots, and her breath came out in clouds. She didn't look back until she reached the edge of the clearing end. That's when she saw it. The second cabin. The one Jack told her never to go near. Its door was slightly open now, creaking in the wind. Something about it drew her closer, despite the fear clawing at her chest. Inside, the air was cold and damp. Dust coated the furniture. On the wall, she saw faint handprints, like someone had touched it recently. And then, on a small table near the window, she found something that made her blood run cold. Her car keys before she could grab them. A soft whisper filled the room. "Emily." She spun around. No one was there. The voice came again, closer this time, right behind her ear. "He shouldn't have brought you here." She stumbled back, terrified, and ran out of the cabin. Snowflakes stung her face as she sprinted toward the road, but standing there, blocking her path, was Jack. "Emily." He called, reaching out. "Wait, stay away from me." She screamed, holding the keys in her shaking hand. "I found them. I'm leaving." His face crumpled with sorrow. "You don't understand. She won't let you go. Don't believe you." She cried and ran past him. He didn't chase her. He just watched, his expression hollow, as she disappeared down the trail. By some miracle, Emily made it to her car. It was half buried in snow, but it started on the first try. Her hands trembled as she gripped the steering wheel and sped away, not daring to look back. The forest seemed endless, the road winding like it never wanted her to leave. Finally, she reached the highway. Relief hit her so hard she started crying. She didn't stop driving until she saw the lights of a small diner on the outskirts of town. Inside, the warmth and chatter felt unreal after the silence of the woods. The waitress brought her coffee, and Emily sat there for a long time trying to calm her shaking hands. She told herself she was safe now. It was over. But when she looked out the window toward the parking lot, her heart stopped. Jack's truck was parked across the street. He was standing beside it. Staring straight at her. She froze, unable to breathe. For a second, she thought about running, but then, as a car passed by and its headlights swept over the spot, he was gone. The truck was gone. Emily left town the next morning. She never went back to that cabin. She tried to forget, but the memory stayed, his voice, the whisper, the shadow by her bed. Months later, she was unpacking boxes in her new apartment when she found something strange inside her suitcase. A small wooden carving, a heart, smooth and unfinished. The same one Jack had been carving by the fire. Taped to it was a note in neat handwriting. "I'm glad you made it out, but she's still watching." Emily dropped it, her hands shaking. She stared at the carving for a long time before putting it away in a drawer she never opened again. Sometimes, at night, when she couldn't sleep, she'd hear something faint, a whisper from the dark corner of her room. It always said the same thing, "Emily." And that's when she'd remember the cabin. Snow. The man who watched her sleep. But the part that haunted her most wasn't the fear. It was the way he'd looked at her, like she was the ghost, not him. And deep down, she sometimes wondered if maybe, just maybe, the whisper was right. Maybe she hadn't left that cabin at all.